Canada is putting $27.6 billion worth of dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs on more than 700 U.S. products. The government is also rolling out a $7.5 billion plan to support Canadian businesses and workers. That includes employment insurance, financing, and loans as they weather this trade war. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly joins me now. Nice to see you, Minister. Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Let's start with the counter-tariffs you announced today. I noticed that some of the products that are on this list are actually U.S. goods that are coming from what you could consider swing states in the United States, like lobster from Maine, plastic and appliances from Ohio, cheese curds from Wisconsin. The list goes on. Was that by design? Was this list drawn up with the intention of punishing some of those Republican-held states or some of the states that could be in contention in the midterm elections that are coming up this fall?
Well, first and foremost, when you look at the counter-tariffs that were imposed on us in the context of this trade war and really opening a new chapter of this trade war, what we're seeing is that there is a clear targeting of our workers, of our sectors, and clearly there's been a lot of thoughts and thinking around deciding which tariffs would go where. And so in that context, what we did first and foremost was really to help to protect our own businesses, because we've been dealing with the trade war through the tariffs on auto, on steel, on aluminum, and forestry. But what is different with this new chapter is that there's so many different sectors, from the garment and textiles to the cement, plastics, wood products, hockey sticks, furniture, etc. And so what we needed to do is to protect the markets of the businesses that are already selling to Canadians, to make sure that the American products would not actually compete against them at an unfair level at the time where they can't export to the U.S. So that was the first thing. And second, of course, we needed to make sure that we were going to go after really important products that are strategic. That's exactly why we also have more than $27 billion, nearly $28 billion worth of tariffs targeting U.S. products. So there's been a lot of thoughts and thinking at Finance by my colleague Minister of Finance, François-Philippe Champagne, to do so. And this is a strategy we took in 2018 at the time, and this is a strategy also that, of course, we're taking. The amount of pressure the U.S. is trying to put on our economy is important. Yeah. And so in that context, we're standing on our 2 feet and we're fighting back.
I guess what I'm driving at is it's not a coincidence that you've picked some products that are major exports from some U.S. states that will be critical in deciding the balance of power in Washington. Is that fair to say?
We are putting pressure clearly on different states and different people. We don't want to do that. We don't want this trade war. We didn't start it. We've been at the negotiation table until the very last minute. The Prime Minister had to make a call at 10 o'clock on Friday night to leave the negotiating table because of new demands at a time where he thought he had a deal. Yeah. So this is serious. And so that is why, of course, we don't want to do this, but we have to do this because it's a question of protecting jobs and our economy.
I hear you on how this is about leveling the playing field for Canadian products that are now facing very steep 50% tariffs from the United States. But some of these tariff costs will be borne by Canadian consumers, right? By Canadian businesses. I mean, there's a price to pay when you slap these sort of measures on goods that are coming into this country. Have you considered the damage, frankly, that could be done to this country and this economy now that there are $30 billion worth of goods that suddenly got a lot more expensive?
So we know that affordability is a real issue. We know that people are thinking about what are they buying, how is that having an impact on their budget, and they're, looking at their paycheck, looking at what is needed for the kids, for the household, and they're going by the week and the month. We know that. And so that's why we came up with a lot of different supports, even recently with the groceries benefit. But our goal was definitely to make sure that we took that into account. One of the big things, nearly half of the counter tariffs that we're putting in is actually on steel. Because
and aluminum, a lot of aluminum components.
Yes,
too,
because
right?
Remember, the tariffs for steel and aluminum on Canadian steel and aluminum for the US was at 50%, and we were still accepting products at 25%. So there was a gap of 25%.
Right.
And so nearly half of the counter tariffs we announced today are actually on metals going from the US coming to Canada and competing also with our products.
Can we talk?
And of course, if there are businesses that need these steel products because it's important for the supply chain, we will work with them and we'll make sure that it makes sense, like we did during Chapter 1 of this trade war.
Can we talk about the relief measures as well? That was the other component of this announcement today, $7.5 billion worth of programming that's now available to prop up folks who are going to be facing tough times, right, as a result of this trade war and some of these tariffs that we're grappling with. There has been some criticism over the program that was announced today. We heard from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, an organization I know you know well. Dan Kelly, who runs the CFIB, says that the last tariff support program was, as he called it, garbage. And he thinks that today's announcement isn't much better, especially as it relates to small businesses. He feels like, as he calls it, there's an alphabet soup of complicated programs that a lot of smaller operations will not be able to access. What do you say to him and those who are worried that what you've announced today, it's a big ticket item, might not be all that useful for people who are actually suffering as a result of this trade war?
Well, I've been in contact with Dan Kelly a lot in the past few days, and I don't agree necessarily with how he sees things. But I have a lot of respect for him, and my goal is to make things better. So that's why we've adapted, based on his comments, some of the measures that we presented today. And I think one of his big concern was definitely how do you get to small businesses, which is much more the reality now than it was under the steel, auto, and forestry and aluminum. It was the case, but I think we're able to support 1,000 businesses across the country and protect 36,000 jobs. So that was pretty good. But I think because we're dealing with smaller companies, a lot of them in the food sector, the garment sector, a lot of them that don't know necessarily your programs, I get his point that we need to go fast, we'll be agile, and that we need to help companies navigate the system. So I'll work with him. I'll work with the Chamber of Commerce. I've talked to Goldie Hyder, to Candice Lang, to so many different important business leaders to make sure that that would happen. And I think another point that he made, which I completely agree with, was we can't put our small businesses in the circumstances of going through a spiral of debt. And so that is why also we came up with non-repayable contribution up to $3 million, depending on the impacts of tariffs on a business.
So the $7.5 billion in support announced today, that's on top of, I believe, the other $25 billion or so that's been rolled out to this point to help the economy. There's a big price tag attached to these things. And given the state of negotiations, given that we're not necessarily close to getting a trade deal anytime soon, right, given what just happened over the weekend, can the government really afford to be propping up businesses for very long? Like, can you just describe to me the timeline here? Like, are you really in it for the long haul? Because it could be a lot more than the $33 or so billion that's been allocated to this.
Well, yes, we are there for the long haul. Of course, we're in a trade war. The goal is to win the war and actually to be able to win this battle in which we are, which is a new front. New front lines have been opened. After auto, steel, aluminum, and forestry, the front lines are various parts of our economy, majority in BC, Quebec, and Ontario, but also across the country. That being said, we were in a sound fiscal position before going into this new chapter. We will continue to be able also to fight with the right fiscal power. And at the same time, we're doing this in a way that we will adjust as things evolve, because we know that there's a lot of unpredictability coming in from the White House. We saw it even until Friday night, late night. And so, of course, we need to be able to adapt in terms of what can be done more for counter tariffs and to fight back, but also what can be done more to support our businesses. I think my colleague Patty Hajdu, the Minister of Labour, did a great job also having the work-share program to support more workers. That way, businesses will be able to keep their employees.
I want to ask you about President Trump today. You might have seen this tweet. He was professing his love for French Canadians, which might warm your heart a bit. He was saying, let's put the tweet up on the screen for our viewers. "I would never interfere with Canadians speaking French. In fact, I have never even thought of doing such a stupid thing. This lie was made up by a weak and ineffective prime minister in an attempt to gain political support, which he has totally lost from the people of Quebec." We also heard from U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. He was saying that the idea that French was part of these trade talks is a fake and funny story coming from the Prime Minister. Just help us understand how we got to this point. Why are there two different stories really on how French was part of these negotiations?
So first, I was not part of the negotiations, so I've been briefed by the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's team and Dominique Leblanc. But, I was asked that question in a press conference earlier today, and to react to what President Trump had said regarding French Canadians, I said it's not a question of love. It's a question of respect and of our own sovereignty. And so we've created this country out of a partnership, an alliance between English, that became English Canadians, and French Canadians. And we created so to make sure that we would not become the U.S. And of course, we have a lot of work to do on reconciliation. We all know that. But for more than 150 years, we knew that when it came to protecting our own national identity, we need to work on it, but we need to make sure that we would have cultural policies, from bilingualism to protecting our two official languages, to having CBC Radio Canada, to having also online streaming platforms participating and supporting Canadian content as core of any trade agreement. We were able to do so in the protection of cultural content in the TPP, so the free trade agreement with Asia, with the one with Europe, with the one also that is part of NAFTA. And we've done so since we've had free trade. The Mulroney government actually did that at the time and eventually developed the Broadcasting Act. So my goal is not to give you a history lesson or to talk about the history to Canadians watching us right now, but my goal is that there's been every single government in the past in Canada has always stood up for these cultural policies.
It's a red line. It's a red
because
line.
It's a red line. Because we know that we need to protect our DNA as a country, our national identity. I must say also, as the Minister of Industry, there's 900,000 people working in the cultural sector. This is not a small sector. It's the cameramen that are behind the scenes right now that folks at home can't see. It is the people working on shows. It is the people obviously working on big American productions coming to Canada.
Sure.
All that, these people are important. They also earn a decent living, and we need to make sure that we protect their jobs.
Just very quickly, because I'm running out of time, but President Trump and Ontario Premier Doug Ford have been kind of going at it over the last couple of days. I think you've probably seen some of the commentary. It's gotten quite personal at times, right? Trump called Ford a flunky, less charismatic, less intelligent than his late brother, Rob Ford. And the Premier, in turn, has called Trump a loser, the king of bankruptcies. Kiss his arse, he said in a couple instances. Do you worry that this war of words and the tone that we're seeing from these two gentlemen, do you worry that that could stymie any hope of getting a deal between our two countries? Because it really has gotten quite nasty.
I think, yes, emotions are high and people are mad, and I understand that. And we're proud people, and we don't like what is being done to our country. But my point is we have to be smart. We have to be strategic. We have to think long game. We have to think about how we'll win this trade war. And we will do so. And today's announcement was exactly that, was being clear-headed and heading in the right direction.
Let's leave it there. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly, appreciate your time.
Thank you.